Okay, Susan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mary Jean. Thanks for hitting the record button. So we'll have a beautiful record this evening of our conversations with Thierry Llewellyn. And the writing exercise will be recorded as well, so you can revisit that. So welcome to all of you who've set aside time from your busy lives to join us for an hour. We're always thrilled to have this time to come together with people from all over the world and just explore these topics together. I'm speaking to you from the Untitled Tract. So part of our practice in Canada is what we call land acknowledgement. And that is a way, part of our kind of peace and justice work as a country to try to come to terms with decolonizing and getting real. And part of that is getting grounded with gratitude and acknowledgement for where we live and for the earth keepers who were the stewards of this land for many, many, many generations before the settlers came along. So I'm going to tell you where I am, and I invite you, if you know where, if you have a land acknowledgement where you live, just to type that into the chat. And it's just a beautiful grounding way of coming together in gratitude for the actual land that sustains us. So I am in Great Lakes country in central Canada, and a place called the Untitled Tract. This is land that was promised to the Six Nations of the Grand River and was the traditional homelands of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and neutral peoples. And I invite all of you to enter your territorial acknowledgement into chat. It's just a beautiful way of us to come together, take a deep breath, and begin the night with gratitude. And it's evening where I am, maybe not be evening where you are, but so you'll forgive me for that. That little slip. Life writing, for those of you who are new to the genre, it's an integrative genre that unites memory and experience. Spiritual life writing invites the whole self in. Memory and experience, fact, feeling and imagination, the profane and the sacred. So we offer these sessions to help you find your authentic voice and to shed whatever fears make you hold your tongue. Our 2022 webinars in life writing bring you a diverse range of writers who are helping us integrate writing with spiritual life and practice. And I'll introduce you to my guest for this evening, tell you a little bit about her. I'm thrilled to have this person with us. This is Thierry Llewellyn from Pender Island, BC. And she's going to help us think about the question, I guess the question I would put it is really, how shall we live? And what's the place of community in our lives? What does community mean to each of us? And what can we do to create one around us that's safe, fulfilling, and sustaining? And Joy has spent much of her life traveling the globe and writing about her solo and family explorations of a hugely eclectic range of intentional communities, be they religious, ecotourism, transformational group therapy, or isolated farming intentional communities. As American writer Margaret Wheatley wrote, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. So tonight, Joy will help us see why some intentional communities work and flourish, and while others flounder or fail. So, Joy, welcome. Wait, can you unmute? Is Joy unmuted? Joy, where are you?
Magic button, thank you.
Magic button, there you are. Welcome. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, a pleasure. I was joking for the rest of you. I was joking earlier that I actually put on lipstick for the first time in 18 months. So this is for you.
That's the power of collective energy, right? The community shows up and you just showed up for the rest of us. I love it. That's fantastic. And I know you've been to many of these sessions, but it's just really such a pleasure to have you here as a guest. And I often know that there are people lurking from session to session who have a specialty or a passion, and just finding out what that is. And yours is really amazing. And of course, you have a whole manuscript that you've written about this. So I feel very, very lucky that we can have this conversation tonight. So can I kind of dive in and
yes, please.
Okay. So I love, you sent me this beautiful quote by the Irish poet John O'Donoghue saying, "This is my mantra. This is how I want to live." And it is, I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. So say a bit about that and just
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
whole, yeah.
Oh, I have very restless feet. And so that particular quote seemed to satisfy my need to travel a lot. And I find, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think I've come to realize that travel is probably my form of spiritual practice. Because when I travel and I'm in unfamiliar territory, I am challenged, I feel wonder, I learn a lot, I get different perspectives. And so that quote just seemed to reflect the gift, of new, and of course I'm a Pisces, so anything with water in it works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, and I should say something about your background too. So you are a classic nomad, right? But I think you've also lived something of a charmed life. I mean, you've been able to combine your love of travel and teaching with writing. So you published travel essays, story edited 1,500 film and television scripts, run workshops and taught screenwriting in Canada, India, and China.
Yeah.
You write travel adventure novels, and now you have this fantastic memoir about journeys to international communities around the globe. So yeah, that's a pretty impressive range of things. And you started on this path when you were very young, is that right? When you were 17 or so?
Yes. My family owned hunting and fishing camps in northern Quebec, and they were about 1,600 kilometers north of Montreal. So it's Kaniapascore River eventually ends up in Ungava Bay. And so every spring, in June to September, we would fly in progressively smaller planes until we were in a beaver bush plane and would land in the camp. And then within a very short period, we'd have, it was American guests, because what Canadian would pay big bucks to go to a place without electricity or running water and lots of mosquitoes? They can have that anywhere. So, yeah, but what it did was put in my body this need every spring and fall to move, I think. And so when I graduated from high school, I got a job as a governess for a woman who was traveling partway around the world, and she needed or a nanny actually, needed someone to help her with her kids. So I did that, and then ended up leaving her in Australia, where I got a job as a governess for a little girl for a while, and then traveled. And I traveled for 2 years and then went back to school. And it just fed my soul. It was really great. Fell in love, had my heart broken, had adventures, all the things you're supposed to do when you're 18 and 19.
Yeah,
it was great. And so I just kept doing it, and I was very blessed. I've been married twice. Both men were nomads, but Evan, I've been with him 35 years, and he also has nomadic feet. And so we made a commitment when we met that every 5 years or 6 years, we would take off a year if possible and go somewhere. So we've lived in different countries. We took our kids around the world for a year backpacking at one point. So I've just managed to put it all into my life in a really fun way. I feel really blessed. Yeah.
That's really incredible. Yeah, especially the part of pulling up stakes every few years and traveling with children. Yeah. So we'll get into that. So
Yeah.
where does okay, let's take a step back for a moment and just tell us about the concept of intentional communities, what that means, and then how that fits together for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give a very basic definition with the understanding that, it's what I like about it is that I don't want it to have boundaries. So it's a group of people, religious, secular, who get together, who have common values and interests. And it could be ecological, maybe it's a farm like a kibbutz, or maybe it's religious like Plum Village in France, which we'll talk about, or in monasteries, maybe it's an artist colony. It could be students living together because it's cheaper to share a house. Big thing these days, of course, are seniors communities. We have 4 or 5 women who built a house on one of the Gulf Islands close to me, and they are going to just see out their retirement together in that way. So they've made an intentional community. So it's finding like-minded souls, hoping you can work out all the glitches that come with living with other people, because that's not very easy, I know. And yeah, so that's the intentional community part. Most of my travels seem to have been what I would call a pilgrimage. So I put lots of energy into visiting different religious sites, different secular sites. What I have discovered in the last few years, there are some advantages to aging. You get clearer about some things, I think. So I have discovered that even though I put all this energy and wrote all about the pilgrimage, it was the community and the place that hooked me.
Mhm.
And that's where I did most of my learning. And so, I mean, I don't know if you put it there, you and I had laughed about, for years, the line I used to say was YouTube Bono's line about, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Well, I realized in hindsight, as I'm putting this manuscript together of intentional communities, I actually found what I was looking for. I just found it in a lot of places. And it's
Right.
not limited to one. And that was a gift. That was an unexpected finding.
That's interesting because this, if I'm not mistaken, if I can remember that far now, you actually started this whole book as that was going to be around pilgrimage, right? That was your initial understanding of what the memoir would be, but then you're saying, really, having worked your way through it, you've discovered, no, it's actually about the communities themselves. That's what you want to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing what worked in communities. And because most of them, one of them I was in for 2 years, a lot of them, they were much shorter times. I was still in romance with a lot of them.
Yeah.
So it was fabulous, just fabulous. I thought, oh, I just want to move here and stay here forever. And then, of course, even after a little visit, you start to see some cracks. And so it's an interesting process right now as I'm working on all of these pieces I had written some 30 years ago, and looking back and doing interviews with people who are now in those places. And, I haven't been in a while, to see how things had changed. And it's one of the biggest surprises has been I'm working the chapter I'm really stuck on right now is what happens when the guru dies, is what I've called it.
Right.
So what happens when Osho or Rajneesh, when he died in Pune? What happened when Sri Aurobindo died in India and in Oroville? And of course, the most recent one that has touched many of our hearts is Thich Nhat Hanh's death in January in Plum Village. So it's a whole other level to go on with our own aging that many of us are going through, and which communities prepared for it, which ones are just so guru focused that they're going to collapse. When Sri Aurobindo and then his consort, the mother, died, chaos, division, it's just, it took probably 20 years for any kind of coming together sort of happen. So, and yet, listening to how things have been handled at Plum Village, I'm so touched by the community and their understanding. They have been groomed to continue. Their leader was fabulous. I'm assuming some of you, I see some nods, so I'm thinking some people have been to Plum Village or know of Thich Nhat Hanh, but he was a powerful presence, but he's not, the fact that he has gone does not mean Plum Village is going to end.
Exactly.
An amazing legacy of practice.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting, I think, Will, to find out in the crowd here who has traveled like this, who has that affinity, such as you do, to that pilgrimage and that connection to intentional community. So we were talking just a bit before we came live about I know my background, and there's probably a few people on this assembled here too, is really deeply connected to the new religious movements that grew up in the 19th century in America, which had a huge communitarian streak, right? So Shakers, Quakers, Transcendentalists, Mormons, all over the place. It was just a really the communitarian drive, the idea that you come together, find the like-minded souls, and there's this incredible sense of purpose. and definition was just all over the place. And so I grew up really incredibly attracted to that. Ran off, at 18 to a version of it in the hills of Appalachia. It just seemed like the most normal thing in the world to me. Other people were backpacking around Europe, and I thought, no, I'm going to the commune. That's the place for me, And it felt, I think, because I'd grown up with this understanding that it was a natural thing for people, small groups of people, to want to kind of hive off and kind of purify ourselves in relation to the mainstream, and just get very clear, very focused around these are the values, these are the traditions, these are the things we inherit, and very self-reliant, right? That big self-reliant piece was really at the core. Yep. And a tremendous, like a vitalizing sense of purity. Of course, this is what's so interesting about it, right? Because over time, these places don't always have such a great reputation. But when you're in it, right, if you're in a place like that, and it feels like it's working, it does have this incredible sense of, it's almost a transcendent feeling that you're in a place where everything is kind of magical and everyone's there for a reason, and the purpose of what's holding it together is incredible. So, but it's ephemeral. It can be ephemeral. Right? It can work for a time and maybe not always, but yeah. So very interested to hear more.
And then the wrong two people fall in love and all hell breaks loose. I know. It's always that darn personality that just interrupts everything there.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. I
know.
Yeah.
It is interesting. When we first met and you talked a bit about your background, and I thought, oh gosh, yes, kindred spirit. So there was such a romance around wanting to make a better place. And there's arrogance in that too. Somehow we thought we could do it better than our parents had done it. And we were going to do it on the land and living in a teepee and all of that stuff. So I know, got to admire our go-to-ativeness though. Didn't stop us, did it?
Naivete or whatever it was. It was tremendous. Yeah, I took my daughter in 2018. She and I retraced the steps. Also, I've been married twice, right? So that was the first marriage. Elope, run off in secret, elope to the commune, and then I lost touch with those people. And so 40 some years later, she and I made a little pilgrimage together to see. I wanted to see if I could find them. Where they did this place still exist? Were the people still there? What had happened? And it was phenomenal because that the founding group that had bought all this land in Comet, they were still there. They were absolutely incredible. Wow. They just welcomed us with open arms and made the same cornmeal griddle cakes that they fed me when I was 18. I was like the wayward bride, and they said, "Oh, we'll make the same griddle cakes." So I think it was interesting for my daughter, who should have been in late 20s at the time, but just to see that, it's always so interesting, that intergenerational piece, right? What did that idealism look like, that I was wearing at the time, and doing it against my family's wishes, and doing it for lots of idealistic, all the best and the worst reasons.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting that they had actually made it. They'd actually made it
work. That's fabulous.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. Yeah. So it restored my faith in humanity. Yeah, it was interesting.
And I remember coming home, because I ended up living in an ashram in Australia, and coming home, and by then I was vegetarian and quite righteous about it too. Meal for my family, and my father looked at it and said, "I'm not eating this hippie shit." He was a meat and potatoes kind of bushman, he didn't believe in that.
Yeah. So of course you had that to push off of it, which is so perfect.
I know. So what appealed to me in those days has changed, and that's the exercise that we'll be doing. So I'm really looking forward to hearing people's experiences. But it's an exciting time right now. Well, the world is crazy, but there are opportunities and possibilities now for us to live outside the box and to still make our own community, be it somewhat different, and so.
So why don't you read a bit from your manuscript? Set that up for us and read a bit before we go into the writing exercise and time for processing.
When we lived in, we've lived in France quite a bit on and off. That's my husband's heart place. And when we were there, the woman who became my best buddy, She was part of the inner circle of Shyalpa Rinpoche, who is a Rinpoche is like a lama. And he's a renowned teacher has his main monastery in Kathmandu. And he had just started the process of writing a book of his teachings. So she arranged for me to be asked to go and live there in the monastery in Kathmandu for 6 weeks to potentially look at making a documentary mainly.
Okay.
So and he's of the lineage where he could marry. So he had a wife and 3 sweet, sweet children. And and so within 2 weeks, I realized we were not on the same path, but I loved his wife. And she had grown up in a Tibetan refugee camp in India, very little education, stunningly beautiful. And here she was running this monastery, and she was, with 150 young monks, 30 young nuns, lots of teachers and staff. She was organizing 500 people teaching events in Hong Kong, which I went to. And she was the one I wanted to follow around with the camera. But this was one of those places where there is the guru, and then there is everyone else.
Uh-huh.
In fact, she had to kiss his feet every morning when she woke up. So it's just of a level of following that I found hard. So, and they were sweet and patient and welcoming and kind. But as I write in this story here, they kept telling me, get out of your North American mind, get out of your, so this is just one little moment I had. It was quite stressful. I started to call it like a medieval castle, because the politics were so intense, and I only had 6 weeks to kind of learn my way through it. So this is one little moment in that place. I called it Broken Rules. It's just taken out of the chapter on the monastery. I may not agree with everything the Rinpoche says or does. I might struggle with the obedience demanded of everyone living at Shyalpa Monastery outside Kathmandu, Nepal. I can hear myself muttering over the obvious 1950s gender role divisions and expectations. But that also doesn't stop me from being aware of how happy and healthy the 150 young monks and 30 nuns are who live here, and to see that boys will be boys even when they wear monks' robes. One morning, I crossed the courtyard in front of the shrine room where the teenage monks and nuns chant and meditate at different times of the day. I saw 2 red and gold patterned shrine room rugs slung over a bamboo pole set between 2 trees. More rugs were in a heap on the grass. It was obviously a cleaning day, but I could only see 1 young monk. This was unusual. Most chores involved several monks and nuns working as a team. The solitary 15-year-old monk was bent over, his hands on his knees, peering down on the footpath into the grass terrace below. He heard my footsteps and spun around. We looked at each other, and in that moment, every mother and teacher bone in my body knew he was guilty of something. I gave him a smile, and he let out a laugh of relief. Someone on the footpath below called out. I heard more laughter, looked up, and saw another 15-year-old monk holding precariously to the trunk of a nearby tree. He grinned down at me and quickly resumed swinging the branch beside him back and forth with gusto, causing ripe fruit to fall to a third monk below. Their laughter made me feel included in their truancy from work. I guess I was considered friendly because I wasn't one of the senior monks, or the Rinpoche's uncle, who was a retired Gurkha soldier, or Amala, the Rinpoche's strict elderly mother. Amala had been very gracious with me, often taking my hand and gently patting it. I'd made so many naive mistakes. I think she thought I wasn't very intelligent and needed some kind gestures. She'd raised 7 children in a Tibetan camp in India, had 2 children and her husband died during those years, and knew from personal experience what hardships life can bring. She had no patience for anyone, young or old, who shirked their duties. The 3 truants might be monks, but they were teenagers too. And what I saw on that tree and on that terrace below was freedom in action. Being included in a broken rule was an unexpected gift in this authoritarian monastery world, where the politics that played out around me between the Rinpoche's family, the Nepalese servants, the Tibetan teacher monks, and the wealthy Chinese women who came for private consultations with the Rinpoche made me feel like I was living in a medieval royal castle. All it took was one broken rule, one slack moment of responsibility, and I laughed for the first time in days.
Nice, nice. What's the title of that chapter when we get around to
broken rules? Because I was always
of course,
breaking them, it seemed.
There we go. And that beautiful balance then between what the rules that are broken and the rules that are needed to hold the whole structure together.
And I had to keep reminding myself. So the servants were paid. I think they got $450. No, $450 a year was the Tibetan average wage. And they got $25 a month and got it every Sunday afternoon off. But they got medical and dental. They were fed. All the money went home to their villages, and they were working for their Lama, their Rinpoche. So for them, it was not a bad situation.
Right.
So I just had to get out.
Right. Constantly be adjusting. And did you ever make the documentary? Yes or no?
I didn't. I talked to her about it at one point, and she just laughed because she knew it was a no-go. I just thought it would have, it
would have been really, really interesting.
There's a great quote, and I can see the guy in front of me, and I can't think of his name, but he was also married, another guru, and his wife said, "Sure, he's enlightened, but wait till his mother visits." I thought, yep, so
that's like inside. I know, that's like the story about Henry David Thoreau, right? When he was writing Walden, right? And his mom was
taking his laundry to his mother.
Mom was doing the laundry. Yeah, that's how Walden got written. Okay, so let's go into the writing exercise. I'll find the slides while you set up our
okay.
What that's about. That would be great. Just talk a bit about.
Okay.
Wait, hang on. Sorry. Let me screen share here.
Oh, okay. So the big learning, as I said, for me, putting this manuscript together and pulling all these pieces I've written or rewriting some, was to see how my romantic image of what I wanted when I was 18, 19, 20 in a community, how it had changed. I'm turning 67 in 3 days. So what I want now is very different. And I laughed with Susan, when I was 18 or 19, I just wanted to find someone like John Denver who would sing me songs in a mountainside and I'd never have to wear a bra. All that has changed now. I want a tap that has the letter H on it, so I have running hot water. So what I've done is put together a series of questions, and my challenge to you and my curiosity about your responses is my thought would be sort of fast. The faster you respond, the more interesting it will be, I think, because they will just be immediate heart reactions. So I put together a series of questions. And I love what this, Susan has kind of condensed it with these 3 starters, and then we'll show you the points. What did community mean to you years ago? What was your connection, if any, to intentional communities? And how has your thinking about community changed? So there will be a page coming up soon that has, I think, about 10 bullet points. And just to get you thinking about, okay, when you were 18, 20, 25, what 10 things did you think were non-negotiable? So everybody would be the same. You wanted rural, did you want to live in the country, or were you envisioning living in an artistic community in Montmartre in Paris? So I'm curious to have you do 2 lists. So one would be quick points in answer to the questions that you'll see in a minute. What are 10 points that were non-negotiable in your mind when you were 18, 20, 25? I think, is that part coming up about rural or urban?
The list will come up.
Okay, good. Yeah. Multi-generational, is it political?
Yeah.
Did you want to share meals, that kind of thing? And then just give yourself a few breaths and make a new list out of your experience now. Because I don't have the same patience or interest in doing things now that I assumed was the only way they could be done. I seem to require much more time alone. I would be happy to live communally, but we're talking 3 or 4 people instead of a community of 50, that kind of thing. So I challenge you to go through these questions and think about them. And I am a believer in sort of first hits. So I did say to Susan, let's make it fairly fast, 8 to 10 minutes at the most.
Okay, let's do 5 then.
5 minutes. Woo-hoo. All right. So
pass through.
that's a fast one. Yeah. And yeah. And I assumed I needed a teacher in those days. And I like having a teacher now, but I have a lot of very wise friends. Which one of them is sharing the screen with me right now? So I don't think I need someone who has a title or, that kind of thing. So does that seem okay? Has it been a setup of enough to yourself 5 minutes? And then I really am looking forward to your sharing. I'm hoping people are comfortable, doing a before and after version of this. Exactly. And thanks for participating. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Okay, here we go. And I'll keep track of the time. We're good.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Interesting.
Okay, 1 minute. Okay. And then there's the next slide. Do you want to read this, Joy?
Yes. What would make you want to stay or leave? And then this, I credit Susan with this last one, which I thought was brilliant, and I'm going to shamelessly use. What would be a deal breaker for you in terms of the quality of life, ethos, leadership, or governance? Deal breaker is a fabulous choice of words. Yeah.
Okay. And then Joy, there's just a couple of slides we have at the end here, and I'm going to pull them up because it has your resources listed.
Oh,
So
okay.
this will be things that appear as part of the recording. And if you want to just say something briefly about each slide, there are 3 slides with these lists. So just if you want to say something
Right.
briefly to explain.
Well, what I did was put together a collection of all the places I'm writing about that are included in this manuscript. And I wanted to flag Foundation for Intentional Community. It's a terrific organization, has lots of free online courses, books, podcasts, and things. We did a lot of woofing with our children. Some of you may be familiar with it, working worldwide opportunities on organic farms. So we worked on 4 farms in Europe where you turn up and, you know, I don't know, we worked on a goat farm. We made miso in Tuscany, Italy, you know, just fabulous experiences. And for our kids, it was great. So it was really, really, really good. I started out with a picky eater, and boy, by the end, he would eat anything, including cow's tongue, which blew me away because he never ate meat. So, but you know, you work hard, you're hungry, it's good. Canadian Company of Pilgrims, I'm a huge believer. Evan and I have done 6 of the Camino pilgrimage routes and are heading off actually in July to do the Vézelay Camino. And so I highly recommend them. They're great. Taizé, I've spent time in. I could only go there for a week. It's lovely, wonderful in France, started by this incredible Roman Catholic brother in World War II to hide and take care of Jewish villagers and people who were escaping. And it's now this booming, and it's an example of a place where he died, but it's just continued to flourish. One thing that we didn't talk about that I believe strongly in is intentional communities. There's a lot out there that are not all sugar and spice. So they're sweet, you know. So I talk about Drancy Transit Camp. It was one of my pilgrimage sites that I checked for my master's thesis, and it was a transit camp outside of Paris. So it was where Jews were kept until they were shipped to Auschwitz. So an intentional community of the dark kind. Oroville, I've spent some time in, and I'm sure there's somebody on this group that have done that. Fabulous place, but you know, it's 100 villages in among Tamil villages, and so there's huge hierarchy. It's unsettling, inspiring. It's an interesting mixture of both. And of course, Plum Village, which I think everyone should go and have a chance to rest in and think about and be challenged. Santi Sawagriya, I didn't talk about that. When I was in Nepal, I spent a little time in this place. It is, again, one of my favorite places on the planet. It's a leper colony. I just came out of there feeling like I had been given a gift. It's wonderful. The Haven, I lived there for 2 years. It's a personal professional development place. Some of you may know it. Incredible dynamic duo of 2 men who started it. They are no longer there. They have retired. And so it's struggling right now, but how much is COVID? How much is them not being present? You know, so it's It's interesting. And then Karnataka Health Institute. It's great hospital. I spent a lot of years traveling around the world visiting places where Dr. Lada Hishmanova had worked. And some of you of a certain age will know her as the founder of the Unitarian Service Committee. And yeah, so I wrote a lot about her. I gave a lot of workshops. And this is a hospital that she supported. And we spent some time in during one of my trips. And it was, again, inspiring, amazing. Just, there's so many places to go in the world that just tell you good people abound.
Beautiful. So this will wrap up the portion that is recorded. And we'll stop share. Okay. And so Mary Jane, if you want to